Breaking news. The demographic decline in Russia will be more severe, protracted, and damaging than previously thought. The Russian government statistical service, Rosstat, released its second report on the country's projected population decline on October 20. It projects a drop of over 7 million people by 2046. The first report from Rosstat was released at the end of September, and it forecast a sharp devaluation of the ruble over the next few years. This report forecasted a decline of 3 million people by 2030 outside of the occupied regions of Ukraine, RBC, October 11. The Moscow Times, October 20. Both forecasts indicate that the demographic decline in Russia, which has been predicted by experts for some time, will be more severe, more protracted, and more economically damaging than the Kremlin has anticipated. See Russia in Decline, September 13, 2016. According to a 2019 UN report, the Moscow Times, June 18, the Russian population may be cut in half by the year 2100. There would be many issues if this happened. Some border regions of a marginalized Russia could become so sparsely populated that they risk being absorbed by neighboring regions. Given that demographic trends among Russians are worse than among many non-Russian, especially Muslim, groups, the decline would pose a threat to the dominance of ethnic Russians in the country. Moscow's ability to expand its economy, given its extensive rather than intensive approach, and to field the kind of mass army it has traditionally relied on will be severely hampered by a sharp decline in the population. Novye Izvestnia, November 2, 2022. Predictions with such a long horizon are not without risk, but they do increase the pressure on the Kremlin to implement policies that increase birth rates and decrease mortality. Attention has been diverted away from this demographic disaster because of Russian President Vladimir Putin's war against Ukraine. Putin has maintained his optimism, seemingly convinced that increasing incentives for women to have more children and cracking down on abortions will lead to a revival of Russia's birth rate. However, both Russian and Western specialists agree that this strategy will ultimately fail. They contend that the only way to reverse the population decline is through a radical rise in living standards and a complete overhaul of societal values. Experts in this field have long warned the Russian people that they are making a fatal mistake by ignoring population trends. Publicist.ru, November 23, 2021, Nakanune.ru, June 16, 2022, Nezavizhimaya, January 8, Stoltai, January 24, and Tochno.st, June 18, all report that few Russian politicians consider this to be the country's gravest challenge. The two forecasts made by Rosstat may help change these political perspectives. Independent Russian demographers have recently predicted that the years ending in 2023 and beginning in 2024 will see the lowest birth rates in decades. The impact of the aging population on the potential pool of military personnel is also growing more dire. Nakanune.ru, December 12, 2022, Nezavizhimaya, January 8, Profile.ru, February 21. The first Rosstat report was bleak, but the Putin regime was able to keep up its positive messaging despite the data. The National Statistics Office has reported that the country's population is decreasing much faster than predicted, RBC, October 11. Rosstat experts predicted a 2.1 million drop in Russia's population by 2030. Now they expect that number to drop by another 50%, Eurasia Review, October 15. However, the report did not rule out the possibility of progress being made by the 2030s. Putin has suggested that the most dire predictions made by Western experts and independent Russian demographers can be disregarded. In addition to providing Putin with cover to maintain his claim that Russia's population will be on the rise by 2030, Rosstat's projection of a decline of only 3 million gave Putin room to do so. If the estimated 3.23 million residents of the annexed regions in Ukraine are included, the Russian president is not completely wrong in this assessment. But Putin's claim is misleading and superficial, and Russia's population growth could suffer as a result of such complacency. According to Rostat's research, the Kremlin will only be able to increase its population by a small amount through territorial expansion rather than through increases in births, deaths, or immigration. RBC, October 11. Rostat reports a decrease in births in Russia proper due to a combination of factors including a smaller than average prime childbearing cohort of Russian women and a fertility rate that has dropped from 1.505 children per woman per lifetime to 1.416, which is significantly lower than the 2.2 rate needed for replacement. There was some good news for Moscow in Rostat's initial report: infant mortality rates have been declining. As a result, the Kremlin can boast broadly about improved longevity. While immigration levels have fluctuated in recent years, they have helped close some gaps. Putin's claims are directly refuted in Rostat's second, much more negative report. The leader in the Kremlin claims that by the 2030s, problems will be solved for the most part thanks to his policies and a predicted rise in the number of women of childbearing age. According to a recent report, Russia's population will continue to decline after 2030, with 7.68 million fewer people in the country by 2046. The Moscow Times, October 20. This estimate does not account for the occupied territories of Ukraine. This estimate is 5.3% lower than current numbers and is on par with the size of the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic's population in 1981. It follows that by 2045, there will be fewer than 80 million Russians of working age, down from today's 83.47 million. Rostat also predicts that by mid-century, the proportion of the Russian population under the age of 18 will fall from 18.5% to 15.6%, indicating that the decline in birth rate is expected to continue well beyond 2046. In the grand scheme of things, demographics do determine fate. However, Russia's domestic economy and the war with Ukraine face real bottlenecks due to the speed and scale of the demographic collapse Putin has presided over. These bottlenecks will only get tighter if the Kremlin doesn't change course, and then some Russians will start demanding reforms.